Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're jumping right into a deeply misunderstood pattern of human behavior. There's a certain kind of person who will literally never tell you they're hurting. They won't raise their voice, they won't send you some long, angry message, and they definitely won't just sit across from you and declare, hey, this hurt me. Instead, they go quiet, gradually, invisibly, and completely. So if you're a focused learner trying to understand why you, or maybe someone you love, suddenly just shuts down in the face of emotional pain, you are in the exact right place. We're not here to label anyone as broken, right? We're here to map out the incredible hidden logic behind that silence.
Because there's this haunting reality to going invisibly quiet. On the outside, you know exactly what to do. You smile when you have to, you answer when spoken to, you just carry on with the everyday movements of life. But underneath all of it, in some private room inside yourself that no one else has ever been allowed to enter, you fall apart completely alone. The quiet often looks exactly like anger to other people, but the internal reality, it's pure agony.
So, what does the world outside your head assume is happening? Society often looks at this sudden withdrawal and just slaps a quick label on it: manipulation. They assume you're withholding your voice on purpose just to control the situation.
Or they call it punishment. People think it's this conscious weapon you're wielding specifically to make others feel guilty or to bend them to your will.
Okay, let's dive into this, because psychology actually shatters those societal myths completely. We really need to look at the difference here. On one side, you've got passive aggression. That's an intent to control, where silence is used as a weapon. But the reality for most people, it's a survival strategy. You aren't withdrawing to control anybody, you're retreating to the only place that feels safe. That silence is absolutely not a strategy, it's a scar.
Which brings us to part one, the architecture of silence, built from invalidating environments.
You see, this behavior isn't some random quirk, and it's definitely not a personality trait you were just born with. It was learned. And honestly, it doesn't even require extreme cruelty to learn it. It just requires a consistent, repeated experience where expressing your pain was met with dismissal, irritation, or, you guessed it, silence. Let's walk through how your brain builds this. Your brain is an extraordinary learning machine. Step 1. A child's pain is repeatedly dismissed or punished. Step 2. Your nervous system, which is highly efficient at learning from painful stuff, registers that speaking up is a massive risk. And then Step 3. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain managing complex emotional decisions, encodes a permanent rule. The rule is simple. When you are hurting, go somewhere no one can reach you. You built a wall out of intelligence, not weakness, because at some point the risk of speaking was genuinely higher than the cost of silence.
And this brings us to a devastatingly simple truth from Brené Brown's vulnerability research. The capacity to express pain openly is a learned sense of safety. People who can easily say, hey, I'm hurting, didn't magically get a different set of emotions than you did. They just received consistent evidence that showing those emotions was safe. The silent individual, on the other hand, received the exact opposite evidence. You didn't learn to go quiet because you were broken, you learned to go quiet because you were paying attention.
Moving on to part 2, interoceptive sensitivity and the myth of emptiness.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it debunks a massive misunderstanding. When you go quiet, the people around you inevitably assume you're empty inside, that you're cold, distant, unreadable. But the reality, you're profoundly overwhelmed due to something called interoceptive sensitivity. This is your brain's capacity to fiercely read and register the internal, physical signals of emotion, like that tight feeling in your chest or the heaviness behind your eyes. In people who go silent when hurt, this internal signaling system is calibrated incredibly high. Studies even show that individuals who suppress their outward expression actually experience significantly higher levels of physiological arousal during emotional events. Basically, you're carrying a raging storm behind a perfectly closed door.
Carl Jung perfectly described this as the introversion of affect. It's this tendency to direct the energy of your emotional experience entirely inward. And you aren't doing this because you feel less. You're doing it because you learned a long time ago that the inside of your own mind is literally the only safe place to feel anything at all. This leads us directly to our third major component, the burden belief, and protecting others at your own expense. Okay, understanding this requires some deep honesty. When you're hurting, your instinct isn't to reach out to the people who love you. Your instinct is to protect them from the weight of what you're carrying.
You swallow your pain because this old, ingrained belief tells you your needs are just too big for the relationship to survive. But check out this data from a University of Rochester study. It reveals a tragic irony. When you use high emotional suppression to save a connection, it actually results in significantly lower relationship satisfaction. The consistent withholding of your genuine emotional truth creates this quiet, growing distance. The cruelest part of the burden belief is that the very silence you're using to protect the relationship is exactly what slowly hollows it out. You give everyone everything except the one thing that would actually bring them closer to you.
Part 4. Rich Inner Worlds and the Rehearsed Conversation.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens next. Because your mind needed somewhere to put everything it wasn't allowed to say out loud, it built its own invisible room. You end up living in this harsh divide. On one side, you have the rehearsed conversation. It is vast, incredibly detailed, and perfectly safe. In this inner escape hatch, you say every honest thing, every difficult sentence you've ever swallowed. They understand you there, and you aren't carrying it alone. But on the other side is the spoken reality. Silence. Growing distance, swallowed sentences. Sometimes you stay in that rehearsed inner world way longer than is good for you, mostly because it's just so much kinder than the unpredictability of the real world. But man, the loneliness of living in a dimension no one else is invited into, it is incredibly heavy.
Which brings us to Part 5, the cost of retreating and slowly disappearing.
Over time, carrying that heavy, invisible world creates a breaking point. When the accumulation of unspoken things reaches a critical weight, you slowly begin to disappear. You don't confront the person and end things loudly, you just respond a little slower. You initiate less. You take up less space. Renowned psychologist John Gottman identified this as the stonewalling response. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand this. It's a nervous system shutting down from physiological flooding. Your system gets so overwhelmed by emotional input it can no longer process or respond. You are not stonewalling because you stopped caring. Actually, scratch that. It's the exact opposite. You are stonewalling because you care too much, and you have absolutely no safe way to say it. Your system shuts the door purely as an act of self-preservation.
So you find yourself attempting this heartbreaking balancing act, retreating to a distance where you can love without getting hurt. You try to find the exact perfect position where you're close enough to keep the relationship intact, but far enough away to stop the bleeding. The tragedy, though, that distance never stays fixed. It widens. And eventually, the person you were desperately trying not to lose realizes they've been watching you leave for months without ever knowing why.
So the crucial point is right here in our final section, finding a safe harbor and the ultimate test.
Everything we've discussed today traces back to one single profound absence. Underneath all the protection, you've been waiting your entire life for someone to sit close enough and stay long enough to ask the right question. Psychologist John Bowlby framed it beautifully through attachment theory. The fundamental human need is to know there is a safe harbor, a place where being your unguarded, unmanaged self won't cost you anything. Many who go quiet simply grew up without that harbor. Their love always came with conditions. So your silence isn't passivity. It's an ancient, quiet test. You are waiting for evidence that a harbor finally exists.
So, how do you finally break a lifetime of silence? Well, it doesn't happen through sheer willpower. It happens through the real-time accumulation of safety. Step 1, gathering small moments of safety in a real relationship. Step 2, risking just one honest sentence and seeing that the person actually stays. And Step 3, through these accumulated moments, you slowly and irreversibly rewrite the story your nervous system has been telling you. The silence breaks when you finally gather the hard evidence that saying, "I am hurting," won't cost you the person you love.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought. Your silence is not a flaw. It's evidence that you feel deeply and protect fiercely. But ask yourself, are you still running a test to see who is safe, or are you ready to let someone pass it? You know, the quietest people are often carrying the absolute loudest lives. Perhaps today is the day you start inviting someone.
Welcome